Welcome to the Learning Experience Ops Show, where we talk about making learning better that's future ready. I'm Jason Gorman, the founder and CEO of Jackrabbit Learning Experience. I keep coming back to a feeling about our work. We all know the technology is moving fast, and we all know that the people, us, we're trying to move as fast as we can, and our organizations are trying to move as fast as they can also. But I think that the technology and the people and the organizations are moving at three different speeds. And every organization moves differently. Every person in that organization moves differently. So this creates a bit of a three-body problem for us, right? It's just impossible to understand the trajectory and future state of what our work is going to look like, because all of this is the very definition of a complex problem. And my guest today has a name for this. She calls it the pace gap. And more importantly, she has a framework for closing it, not by picking one side over the other, but by treating workflow design as a human capability that is an integrated challenge with the organizational needs. So I'm also excited about this conversation for personal reasons. So Heather was introduced to me by my business partner, James Altman. We went to graduate school together at Northwestern. And when we were talking, James and I were talking about this podcast and what would be important to talk about. I don't think I told you this yet, Heather, but he talked about you and a conversation he had with you and your notion of, design being a thing that should be applied to organizations. And so we were, and that really has become kind of a central idea in this podcast. So I'm glad you're here. Thanks for coming on. So Heather Xu is the founder of Design for Flow. It's a strategic advisory practice founded on the human side of AI transformation. She spent 12 plus years as a director at KPMG in the human capital advisory consulting practice, where she built and grew the firm's L&D strategy and transformation capability. Her work spans organization design, workflow optimization, leadership development, and learning experience design, all centered on one question: how do we create environments that minimize friction, accelerate flow, and enable people to thrive? Welcome to the show, Heather.
Thank you.
All right, so let's jump in with those lightning round questions. What is your 30-second elevator pitch about what you do?
I think you just said it, but really it's how do we design work that flows? It's figuring out that human side of AI adoption. How do we shift our environment in a way that enables human thriving? So how do we do it in a way that amplifies human potential, as well as realizes the benefits of the technology?
All right. And what do you love the most about your work?
I love that it's like a puzzle to me. So I look at the organizational level of workflows, operating model, design, a drive toward organizational outcomes, but then I'm able to go really deep into the human side, the underlying psychology, the mindsets, the motivation, and how do we kind of meet in the middle where we create something that flows from an effectiveness and efficiency perspective, but also flows for the human inside of the process, where they feel like they can move forward with that sense of inner flow, where they're bringing their best selves to the table and, I don't know, just kind of thriving at work.
Well, that's kind of leads nicely into my next question. When you are in flow, when you're in that state, what are you most likely to be doing in your work?
I think what I love most is sort of getting lost in the chaos and complexity about the current state of what exists or what's evolving. And then like sitting there long enough until something coherent emerges and I can create something simple that's not just simple for me to help understand it, but also simple for others to help people navigate it. And whether that's a framework, whether that's a learning program, whether that's just a way of thinking, guiding principles, that's, I think, my sweet spot.
From sweet spot to, let's look at the other side of the coin here, anxiety. What is your biggest anxiety for the future?
I mean, right now, FOBO. I heard that term recently, the fear of becoming obsolete. And definitely is high up there on the like existential crisis side of things. I do find that the more I lean into AI and these emerging technologies and find a way that they amplify my strengths, the more like I'm able to manage that. And then I think the other thing is just the fear of not knowing what's real. I think we're getting so much AI generated content without the validation or the oversight that and even intentional sharing of, AI generated content, I don't think our society is prepared to get to the point where we can't recognize what's actually real.
Yeah.
Those are pretty deep fears.
Those are pretty deep fears.
I
right.
do live in Puerto Rico, and I'm like, there's always, we can always grow bananas. We can always grow pana trees. Like we can live off the land if everything goes to craps.
That's good. I suppose I could do that in my yard here in Boston if I just dug up sections of it. Less effective in the winter, I suppose. Last lightning round question, and this can be a work thing or it could be a personal thing, but what is a skill that you're trying to learn right now?
So I'm trying to kind of push myself in learning the technical side or like technical capabilities that were beyond my reach before, because now with AI, you don't really need the technical skills to do technical things. So things like building in Claude code, experimenting with different tools. And I'm trying to like look at what I always saw were my gaps and capabilities. So if we take learning program design, for example, the video creation, the interactive element creation, the things that I would have had to hire somebody to do in the past, can I now do those things with the tools available, and kind of fill my own personal skill gaps?
Already a terrific conversation. It's just got us a whole bunch more interest in this conversation. So we've had conversations before, and you told me a bit about your background, and you have told me that in the early part of your career, you spent years in Shanghai. And while you were there, you were doing various things. And you described your time there as being in I love this term, a career wilderness, kind of working in lots of different types of jobs. You mentioned like learning, coaching, communications. But I'm kind of curious to hear about some of those experiences that were early there. And then kind of what your turning point was to travel out of the wilderness and into the next chapter of your life.
So I love my formative Shanghai years. I moved there right after college, and I was an English teacher for a year. I worked at Microsoft where I did coaching and for English, for communications, and customer service for the engineers there. I worked at EF Education. It was curriculum design for some of their English schools, their online school, as well as their in-person schools. And then I pivoted to be a business editor for the transfer pricing tax practice at Ernst & Young. And I think part of I moved to China because I was drawn to it, because I liked the exploration. I was sort of following the spark that led me to different opportunities. But as a foreigner, you weren't really positioned in companies for a longer term career path. So I felt like I was kind of jumping from experience to experience. And ultimately it got to the point where I felt like I needed to shift and kind of bring it all together. But what I love about it was that it really was kind of cultivating a lot of underlying skills that continue to serve me today. And I don't think, I left China and I pursued my master's program at Northwestern where I met James. But I don't think it really clicked as to how valuable all of the different experiences were until I was interviewing with KPMG, and they looked at my resume and they said, wow, this is rich experience. Because when I was interviewing for some different kind of companies, learning teams, they wanted me to kind of fill a box. and I didn't have all the pieces of the box that they wanted me to completely fill. But when I pursued consulting, they saw the value of everything. And I feel like somebody else had to kind of call it out for me to fully realize it. But I think it's a lesson in life that, sometimes we don't set out to kind of drive this linear path. We don't want to, and that's okay. And if we're following that spark, the thing that lights us up inside, and we're staying true to that, every experience grows you and helps you become more of who you are.
I want to just kind of focus in on one piece of what you just said. I think you are the third or fourth person that I've interviewed on this podcast. This is my 20th-ish episode. You're the fourth person who said that they taught English overseas. And I don't really know what to make of that. That's also in my background. So I taught English in the Emirates and here in the States. I think it's a curious pattern, actually, that I'm seeing across this. I think people maybe, I guess in my case, like I was interested in education, so like it sort of matches up. But then maybe I was more interested in the curriculum development than I was in the teaching. Ultimately, I don't know how do you make sense of the teaching part?
Well, I was a journalism undergrad, so I had more of the language background and then the cultural exploration interest. And when I was teaching English, and I did my CELTA certification as well, which is the Cambridge English Language Teaching for Adults certification, which was a really powerful, really, really powerful adult learning experience, like maybe one of the best in my life. And I realized that I liked the learning side, but not so much the English side. I get lost in grammar. It's one thing to be able to write well. It's another thing to be able to explain past progressive tense effectively. So I think that was the thread that kind of carried me, was the creation of experiences that help the light bulb moment go off for people. But then how do I do that not in an English classroom?
I appreciate the reflection. You talk about in that moment where you kind of solidified what you wanted to do, possibly right before you started at KPMG. You read a book called First Break All the Rules, which is a fabulous title by Marcus Buckingham. And I'm kind of curious, what was it in that book that sparked change for you?
So it's an interesting story. They gave that book out to all of the managers at Microsoft at the time, and one of my friends and teammates let me borrow it, and I stole it. I never gave it back because it talks about I still have it. Talks about how to create a strengths-based workplace that doesn't define people's responsibilities by, the org chart and the job title, but instead, how do you create an environment where people are able to do what they do best. And more people might be familiar with the Strengths Finder and Now Discover Your Strengths, those books by Marcus Buckingham. This is the one that came first. And the premise was really your strengths are what make you feel strong, not what you're necessarily good at. And I think as a young kind of in my first corporate job at Microsoft, that really resonated. But moreover, I looked at the book and I said, how do I do that? What is the job where somebody is responsible for helping create that sense of strength-based organization in their company? And I don't know that I've ever figured out how exactly to do that. I think that it's still an ideal view in my mind, but I think that I bring a lot of that to the work that I do of how do I create workflows that bring people to life? How do I kind of make sure they're focused on the right outcomes, but also the human experience? And so that's that. Through that book, I was like, what's the field that I need to be studying? And that's how I ended up finding the Learning and Organizational Change program at Northwestern.
Got it. I don't remember exactly how you said it, but it was something like strengths aren't necessarily the thing that you're good at. They're the thing that make you feel
Make you.
strong at work.
Mhm.
Can
Yeah, just
you
what your
say more
strengths
about that?
are. So you might be really good at something. Like I am for my own personal life. I was a journalism major. I can edit something to perfection. I can hone, the sentence structure, the document. Is that the thing that brings me to life? No, not at all. Like
I see.
that final 20% of getting a document perfect, that is what drains me from the whole experience. And if I could offload that to somebody, AI, I would be very happy to do that. And so the recognition is like it's about energy. Where do you get your energy? What makes you feel strong? It's not what you might be perfect at. And it also you might feel strong in some things that you're not good at, but maybe that's a sign that you need to cultivate those skills.
Thank you. All right, well, let's talk about KPMG because that's the next part of your story.
Okay.
So you went there, you built their learning strategy capability from the ground up. That sounds like uh, a challenge. So, what was the hardest part of building a new capability like that?
So KPMG, and I love my experience there, and I still do a lot of work with the firm. They specialize in transformation, so HR transformation, finance transformation, and then the group that I was in, which is now called Human Capital Advisory, they we had a learning capability which was all focused on how do we support other transformations with learning experiences, learning programs, but we didn't have our own, like, how do we approach learning strategy and transformation. And the reality is that learning organizations, and I think this is one of the bigger challenges, there's not there might be a learning function, but that's not typically the entire ecosystem of learning that's happening at organizations. And so part of it might fall in HR, part of it might fall adjacent to HR, but then also happening within functions within different departments, also shadow learning organizations. Like there's a widespread of possibility there. And what we did was kind of take the best of how the firm approaches transformation with operating model design, process mapping, process taxonomies, et cetera, and then thought about how do we bring that to a learning function. And so that was, I mean, it was a very exciting time. And I'm glad that capability still exists and is still evolving at the firm. And I'm glad I could kind of be part of the inception of it. But I think, so I don't know if that was the hardest part, but that was sort of how we approached it. And I mean, the hardest part was doing something for the first time without the scaffolding of other people's experience underneath you. But I think that was also the most exciting part too.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I hear that. One thing that I mean, it's almost like a trope in L&D is this seat at the table. Like we need to get our seat at the table, right? And I mean, when I say trope, it kind of is a trope, but I think it's also based on a thing that people feel and experience. It's a real thing, right? That their organizations don't pay the right kind or enough attention to what they do, don't understand their capabilities in the right way. And I can it's hard not to connect that pervasive pre-existing anxiety with the anxiety that you mentioned earlier about like the kind of existential crisis feeling that people in the learning professions, I think, are having now. It's pretty widespread. It's not just you. It's not just me. It's pretty much everybody I talk to. And I'm curious, how do you think, what do you think are the things that we can do to keep ourselves relevant and to be taken seriously with the stakeholders that we work with?
I think there's a lot of different ways I could approach this. Let me think for a second. So I think the first thing is, and maybe AI is enabling this a little bit too, with being able to take on some of the work that L&D teams have historically been not just responsible for, but like drowning in. because I've seen the evolution. Like an L&D function wants to be strategic, and suddenly it's compliance training and this training and process training, and and sort of all of the intakes of this is a need, and your short staff, your minimal staff is sort of drowning in these requests that aren't the most value add. So hopefully AI is enabling some offloading. But the first step is understanding the business strategy. 100%. You have to start with, where's the business going? What are their needs? What are their people needs? And how are we uniquely positioned to move the needle? If you don't start there, you're going to miss the mark. And I think that historically, what I've seen, a lot of learning organizations kind of evaluate their success by the collective view of their learning programs. So it's like, we have this curriculum of programs, and that in and of itself should drive our identity and our success. And I think that that's changing. And so I would challenge learning leaders to kind of think about, is there a different value proposition? Are we really the sum of our learning programs, or are we something else? And I think, I've seen it where, when central teams really do show that they understand the business and they understand the needs, and they're bringing a creative system, a creative approach that's actually kind of shifting mindset, shifting behaviors, enabling capability. The business recognizes that and sees them as a partner. But if they're off kind of creating a set of courses that maybe in and of itself, they might be really good courses, but if they're not moving the business needle, then it's just going to be something on the side that's, taking up the time. It's not even that an hour-long course is kind of a nice to have value. It's something that's detracting people from doing their jobs.
Yeah.
So if it's not adding value, it's reducing value.
Yeah. I mean, we're always, when I say we, L&D specifically in a corporate environment, it's always a cost line, right? And so this is something that I think we're all really aware of. Anybody who works in the corporate environment understands that. And I think the only way out of that is to make it vividly clear how our actions are contributing to revenue. And that's really hard. What a challenge.
Mm-hmm. And so one of the things, and I think this might lead to another question, but so I might be jumping ahead. But I also think that our value isn't just programmatic, or it doesn't need to be. And especially, I mean, we've seen this over the years as we've kind of moved from classroom to e-learning to micro-learning to, to curation to content libraries. Like there's been already a shift in how we deliver value to our organizations. But I think, and I've thought this for a while, and it's becoming even more important, that human connection is going to be even more important in the future because of AI. And we're already starting to see it in the research that people using AI tools, it's now they're becoming less emotionally intelligent when they're interacting with others because they're more impatient. They're expecting people to react and support them as quickly as AI can react and support them. And so I think that as we see this shift where AI can now, I mean, I use it to troubleshoot things. I use it for technical support. I use it to help me learn new capabilities. I use it to help me shape my thinking. We're seeing AI grow in possibility as a personal coach, a thought partner. That really enables learning in the flow of work. And when organizations can do that in a way where, you're bringing the assets and the knowledge bases to, in combination with AI, to surface, things at the moment of need, that's an amazing capability that we didn't have. And so can and should the learning function now kind of elevate out of that, or help shepherd that, but also focus on human connection. And kind of, I don't know what other team is out there that's saying, you know what, but we really got to get our people together to collaborate and be social and learn from each other and build those enduring human skills and not lose sight. We're not designing, or we shouldn't be designing for human plus AI. We should be designing for human plus AI. And so can L&D be the brainchild and the I don't know, and the human collaboration team, potentially.
Yeah.
I think nothing's figured out for the future.
No, nothing's figured out, but I think that's an interesting way to think about the anxiety too, right? I think the anxiety is about, will the thing that I've been doing be a viable job in the future?
Mhm.
The answer is probably no. For many, not everything, but I think many things that people who do this kind of work do. But I do think that a lot of our skills are very translatable to the future. And I've heard this idea echoed in places. I really would love to focus on, you have two frameworks
Mhm.
that you have, and I'd love to talk about those. One is a framework that is really about organizing how people can relate to AI, kind of the different modes. And those for you, you named a couple of them a second ago: coach, thought partner, accelerator, and automator. And I would love to understand each one, and then how we position ourselves in relationship given what we're trying to do.
Yeah. And so great. That one was really built around, the motions of work and how we align AI. So this is like AI enabled process lens of how do we um, think about the interactions that we're having with AI according to the motions of work. And so, coach is anything related to teaching, guiding, helping us shape our own thoughts. And that's, grow me. The motion is grow me. I need to grow. And so I'm going to lean on AI to help myself grow. Thought partner is think with me. So I'm not fully trusting AI to give me wisdom, or in this relationship, I'm kind of asking questions, I'm exploring, I'm co-creating my thinking alongside AI. So it can go research things, it can bring things to the table, I can pontificate, it comes back, and sort of through that iteration, I sharpen my own perspective. Um, Accelerator is I'm working on an output, and I'm not yet kind of tasking it for creating it in entirety. Maybe I'm coming with my own perspectives, getting some input. We're accelerating that production of something tangible, and maybe pressure testing it, looking at it from different angles, honing it. And then the last one is automation, and that's what we're seeing with the agentic AI movement and all of the transformation that's going on is like work for me. And so this was my lens to think about how the different types of interactions that we can have with AI and where they make sense based on a workflow and what I need as a human in that workflow in that moment. And I did a project with an L&D team about a year ago where we worked through some of these things. I didn't have the model yet. And I noticed there was an anchor toward like produce the outcome, automate the process. There's a definite like create learning objectives, create content. And
Yeah.
I really pushed them to think about, how do we start the process differently? Help me learn about something, help me pressure test ideas, help me think about this differently, and then leading into more acceleration and outputs. And the one other thought that I have is that, so I think a lot of companies are moving toward more of the automate, etc. But there's been recent research that shows that the real value added activities are when people ask the more strategic questions.
Hmm.
And so in your workflow, are you anchoring toward using AI as outputs, And could you be using it more to shape your thinking and your ideas and getting more value from it in all of the 4 pillars?
So it sounds like what you're suggesting here is that in a workflow, when we're articulating a workflow, that we're really explicit, right? Step one, maybe we're doing some discovery and we're gathering stuff, and AI has a place with that. Step two, we're not asking for the output. In step two, this is where we are testing our assumptions. We are generating lots of different possible directions. We are finding the gaps in the data that we've gathered, whatever. But that there is an explicit step where AI has a valid, important role, but it is one that is like introducing friction that provokes human thought, like interaction with the content and the problem at a deeper level before moving to the solution. But it's like a step, like, or multiple steps.
Yeah, I think it's part of the process for sure. It might be cyclical. You might go down and then you might come back and you might, might circle. So it's not it's not necessarily linear. But I think it needs to be part of the process, or else we're just going to surrender our thinking to the machine, which I don't think builds us up. It kills our motivation. It kills our sense of identity, and so I think we can get a lot more value and actually elevate our own skills if we're approaching it from this way. And I
And
think what I like about it is that it's just 4. Like, I tried to make it very simple, and I can see myself in these relationships in different ways. Um,
I see it too. And I definitely feel it. I just did a huge project. I was trying to learn Claude Code and really pushing myself to learn these technologies more deeply. And I really found that if I didn't insert myself in the right ways, honestly, the outputs kind of sucked.
I agree.
Right? Just like, I think in that too, it made me realize that, using AI to do that back and forth, that's helpful. AI is helpful there, but then it helped me understand. And I think what you're suggesting is that when people use the tools like that, it will help them realize their value as a stakeholder in the process of doing whatever it is that they're doing, right? And that the AI left on its own actually doesn't do a great job. It misses things, it doesn't understand things, it kind of over indexes on things that humans wouldn't, or an expert wouldn't. So I deeply appreciate that. You do have a second framework. It's a little bit more personal. It's Amplify, Unblock, Stretch, and Free. And I'm curious about this one too.
So this one I call the personal value framework for AI. And this isn't about your workflow necessarily. Like, the first one is like, let's think about the workflow and think about the AI relationships. This one is more about my own personal value proposition with AI. And so if we take Amplify and we circle back to that, like, strength-based workplace, and your strengths are what make you feel strong. What are your strengths? What are you naturally good at? And what are the opportunities for you to work with AI to amplify your strengths? So like I said, I like to kind of get lost in the complexity and like come back up and build a model. AI can help me not get too lost in that complexity. Like, it can go find the insights. I can consume them. I can think about them, discuss them. I can like pull that thread of like, I think there's something here. And it mirrors me and it helps me sort through my own thoughts. And it brings me a level of coherence where I have an idea and I'm actually able to follow it through to something in a way that I haven't been able to do before. And so I find my own personal amplification there. But I also use AI to unblock me. So, like, where do you get stuck in decision making? What are your tendencies for, paralysis? And like, I'm planning a trip to Morocco in a couple weeks, and there's a million different hotel options, and I might get lost. Like, I might spend hours in that in the past. but instead I like shortlist them for me, like give me 5. Um, and it helps me, move past whatever might be getting me stuck. The third one is stretch. So what are those things that it's like the beyond the edge of your comfort zone, your growth opportunities where you need a little bit of a push? And how can AI actually support you in that and maybe nudge you past that? And so, for example, for me, I'm a, I'm a big picture divergent thinker. I have a lot of ideas. The discipline side of like content creation is a struggle. Namely the word discipline, especially if I'm not operating within a structure, like an external structure when I'm inventing it myself. So AI actually helps me like stay consistent, which is really good. Like it just it provides some level of it's holding me accountable for those things, which is really good. And I think that might look different for different people. And then Amplify, Unblock, stretch. And free. Like, what are the things that you really hate to do, and can AI set you free from that? For me, little admin tasks. Are there ways to automate them? Can I set up a system now where I don't have to think about some things anymore? I can kind of hold that for me and surface them up when I need to.
There's
I think it's different for everybody, though.
Yes, definitely different for everybody. And actually, all of this, so much the last couple things that we talked about, there's this kind of theme of human agency and creating room and opportunity to kind of grow ourselves, to make sure that we are part of our process, that we are even personally kind of unlocking things for ourselves that may be hard to unlock without the use of AI, or more, labor to unlock without the use of AI. So this idea of human agency as an enduring skill to cultivate, I'm curious if you could just talk a little bit more about this notion of human agency, and then, what are practical things that people can do to cultivate this in ourselves? What are some day-to-day things that you would recommend?
It's a topic I've been thinking about for like quite a few months now, and I'm really starting to see some articles surface about it, which is interesting. But I think about agency as like our inner drive, to be proactive, to kind of take the reins and have some sense of control in our direction and in the work that we're doing. And underneath agency, I mean, there's some psychology models that are really relevant here, but underneath it, I think, is this idea of intrinsic motivation as well, as being something that's propelling us. And then I think agency is also really critical to our well-being. So if we're operating in a place where we like our sense of agency is deteriorating, I think our well-being is going to deteriorate as well. So that's how I would define agency. And I think why it's important now more than ever is, one, I mean, if we think about our junior team members, they're kind of entering into a workplace environment. The apprenticeship scaffolding is eroding, so they're not getting the experiences that help them build capabilities, and their managers are probably swirling and overwhelmed, and so they're probably getting messages like, be proactive, step up, like I like to say, own your impact, but how do you do that if you don't have a compass or a North Star or the muscles to help you navigate the uncertainty? And then I also think as we're delegating more decisions to AI, our own sense as leaders, our own sense of agency and I mean, I was just reading about this today in a HBR article, that like leaders feel less agency and it's causing a real leadership crisis. So, but it's great that we notice that agency is something that we need. I took it one step further to really think about like, so what does it mean to cultivate agency, and how do you start, and how might that look different for different people? Because I think of like conventional wisdom of like, just go build something, just go do it. And that never resonated to me, like with me, that driver mentality. And so I've been thinking a lot about like the different energies or archetypes of agency, things like, you might be a disciplined builder, who likes to construct things, like really kind of source things, build a plan, see it through execution in a steady way. You might be a curious explorer that's out there uncovering ideas. You might be a systemic sense maker, which I relate to a lot, which is like I'm exploring, but I'm also trying to bring them into a cohesive whole before I can create. And you might be somebody who thrives on social collaboration. And so you need like the human to human interaction in order to kind of get your first step going and get momentum going. Or you might be a rapid creator. So somebody who needs to like just do things, put it out there, see how it lands, see what people think. Those are different, I think, energies for taking the first step. Like really your work probably involves all of them, but what's your starting point? And if you can understand yourself, think about your strengths, think about what you gravitate to, taking that first step is usually enough to just get juices flowing and momentum going, where you can get out of a sense of paralysis.
You actually basically answered my last question already in that answer, but I'm going to try to tweak it a little bit, which was, so you kind of described what the individual can do. What are some things that the organization can do to help set the stage to allow people to take those steps?
I think we have to move toward more agile work environments. I've been a part of multi-year transformations where you kind of move from vision to, design to build to execution and to ramping up people in the meantime. And so 2 years after you start, you have your system and your people ready to roll in a new way of working. That's changed like that. And I'm kind of coming full circle to the pace gap. Like that's the issue is you might put out a workflow that we created for the learning function with AI. Like it's irrelevant now. That was a year ago.
Yeah.
Everything's changed. I would do it completely different today. So I think I mean, it's tough. I think this is the question that doesn't have an answer yet, but we need to figure out where people do have autonomy and decision making. Maybe there's more, like we have to figure out where people get to lean into the process and aren't just managing their agents. And we need to really think about the cognitive burden that is being placed on people as work is intensifying, as their responsibilities no longer do they have as many like low cognitive tasks that allowed their mind to rest. It's, just elevating everything is now important, and there's the term brain fry. People are getting brain fry from too much AI. And if we don't recognize humans as part of the equation that we're solving for with new technology, we're going to erode the skills and the value that make our organizations competitive. And so I don't know if there's a golden ticket answer to the question, but I think the first step is thinking about humans in the part of the process.
I heard somebody talking about using a power user, a coder, using Claude and having the experience of think about what it is that they need to get done. They go to Claude, they explain it, and then they go for a walk. And then when they come back, Claude has done the work, right? And then they review the work, they think about it, right? They decide the next thing that needs to happen. They have a conversation with Claude about it. The Claude gets started, takes another bit of time to go for another walk, right? And I do, this kind of sounds like, I mean, that seems very funny and probably not realistic for most people. But I think in your answer, that's kind of what I'm hearing. Like, we as humans, like we need things like walks to help us think more clearly, to be more productive, that it can't just be work, work, work. It cannot all be optimized all the time. And that as an organization, when we're thinking about how to do this in the right way, how do we make space to allow people to have those kinds of things? Right. So uh, I appreciate that. And I hope that there is not just like a rush into more and more productivity and more efficiency, because I just don't. I can't imagine that working out the right way. And it sounds like that's exactly what these frameworks of yours and how you've described agency is kind of pointing to. There's a real danger for all of us. Here's one last question. It has nothing to do with AI. It has nothing to do with workforce.
Well, you haven't heard my answer yet.
No, I have not. So this comes from Simon Greenwald, and who is a giant audiophile. And so I was unsurprised by his question. So his question for you is, what is your desert island album? Meaning you could only listen to one album for the rest of your life. What would it be?
So this is where I am going to bring AI into the answer, because I've been taking some of my inspirational contemplative writing and my poetry and actually using an AI tool to turn it into songs.
Whoa.
And it's been really powerful to hear my words that I wrote myself back before AI, like presented to me in a different way. So I would make an album of that and I would take it with me, because that writing is really empowering. And I think I would need that on a desert island.
Thank you for giving me a wonderful, surprising answer at the end of this conversation, and so many amazing insights through the course of this conversation. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for coming on to the show, Heather.
I've had so much fun. This has been great. I love it.
It has been great.
It's good to have some human to human interaction.
Indeed.
Even if it's remote.
Absolutely. It was kind of the point. We just need to be talking to each other now. You said that there's like the value of connection is going up. We're going to need more of it in the future. And I think the AI is going to be, it's going to be tempting to just be locked in conversation with AI, but we can't. We got to do this stuff. Yeah. So thanks for doing this.
Thank you so much, Jason. I've loved it.
That's a wrap on this episode. If you found this useful, please subscribe and share it with a fellow learning professional. It's the best way to help others find the show. And if you want to keep the conversation going, we have two ways to do it. We have a monthly online AI forum for learning professionals. We also have a Slack community by the same name, totally dedicated to learning professionals. These are great places to meet more people who do the kinds of things that we do and make sense of the world that we're in and what's coming together. You can find the links in the show notes, or you can reach out directly to us at podcast@jackrabbitlx.com. See you next time.